one of the most common questions I get from English learners is, do I need a private teacher? Do I need to pay money to have a teacher, maybe online, for example, talk to me, give me feedback, give me a lesson? And it's an important question. You have to answer this question for yourself. And I want to say, don't let me tell you that the answer is yes or no, but let me give you some things to consider so that you can decide that for yourself, so that you can decide if the answer is yes or no. I think in some situations, you should get a private teacher. It can help you, and it is worth the money to invest in that. In some other cases, perhaps not. And I'm going to try to give you some questions to consider, to ask yourself before you make that decision. Yes or no? Should I get a private teacher or not? And then, after we do that, I'm going to give you some suggestions for if you decide to find a teacher. I'm going to tell you how you can know if your teacher is a good one or not. Okay, because there are, I think, plenty of great teachers out there who can give you really good instruction, guide you in the right direction, and just as many terrible teachers. And if you go with the wrong ones, then you'll be wasting your time and your money. So, those two things. Now, let's start with some basic questions, things that you should ask yourself. And we'll talk through these one by one. The first one, what is your goal? Now, what does that mean? What is your goal? Why do we need to think about that? What if your goal is just to be able to watch movies and understand the movies that you watch in English? What if your goal is just to be able to read books or browse things online? What if your goal is to just know English and how well you actually speak the language, your fluency, is not so important to you? Well, it's very important to think about what your goal is, because only after you know what your goal is can you start to decide whether or not you need a teacher. If your main goal is, I must be able to speak clearly, I need to be able to communicate at a pretty high level with native English speakers, I need to be fluent in spoken English, then you may want to carefully consider choosing a good teacher, because a teacher can get you closer to that specific goal, being able to speak naturally, because they can identify, help you, point you in the right direction, right? They can say, here's an issue you have, there's an issue you have you didn't notice, or here's something that native English speakers say, this is how we say this idea, you said it in a kind of unnatural way, let's try it this way, right? They can teach you a lot of things, they can point you in the right direction. But unless you know what your goal is, you can't figure out which one you are. So ask yourself, what's your goal? What do you want? I would say if your goal is just to understand movies and read articles online and just know English in general, you do not need a teacher, especially not a native English teacher. That would be a waste of money. Next one, do you know what your weak areas are? Now, here we're talking just about spoken English, okay? Your level of fluency. If you know for a fact that you have a long way to go with your spoken English, there are issues, there are problems, but you can't quite figure out where those issues are. Is there something wrong with the way I'm shaping my mouth when I say things? Is there something wrong with how I'm organizing my sentences or how I'm thinking? Are there issues with maybe the phrases that I choose? Maybe I learned a phrase, but I use it in the wrong place, for example. Are there problems with maybe how I use words, right? Maybe I use a word that's right, but it might have another meaning and I don't know that other meaning. There are a lot of things like this. If you know all of those things, yeah, I know I have this issue and I know how to fix it. I know I have that issue and I know how to fix it. There's this grammar issue that I have, I know how to fix that. Well, then what do you need a teacher for? If you know all of the things that you need to improve on to become more fluent, then what's a teacher for? Well, okay, to teach you a few things here and there. But if you know how to do it, you can learn most of the things you need to know on your own. So this one is more like if you don't know what your weak areas are exactly, but you know you need to improve, a teacher is probably someone who can help you with that. So you might want to consider a teacher in that case. You might want to consider signing up for a one-to-one class with a native English-speaking teacher. Again, if you know where all of your issues are, great, wonderful. If you're very self-aware, you're able to notice these things, fantastic. You may not need a teacher, unless you think that a teacher could point out some new ways to express yourself or more native-sounding expressions, right? Words and phrases that might be a little unnatural that you could improve on. Things here and there. But if you generally have a picture of your weak areas, maybe you don't need a teacher. The next one. Are you making progress on your own, or are you stuck? Right? You've been working for 6 months. You've been trying to improve. You study every day. You practice every day. Maybe you do some writing prompts. Maybe you do some speaking prompts. Anyway, you work at it. You try your best, but for whatever reason, you're just not getting better. And you feel like the last 6 months has been almost a waste of time. You're not getting better, and you can notice that you're not. Well, in this case, it might be because you're not aware of the issues, like the last one we talked about. But it may just be you haven't put yourself in the situation where you have the pressure to communicate with someone who is also getting ready to criticize you, right? This, just being in that situation, this is very important. Getting used to speaking with people, especially with people who are carefully listening to everything you say, is a part of becoming a better English speaker, right? If you just practice on your own, what do you find? Well, a lot of people say, yeah, but as soon as I go out and I have a conversation, then I lose my words. I don't know what I'm talking about. I forget everything that I learned. I feel so much pressure, right? Okay. Well, in that case, you need to get used to that. If you're afraid to talk to others, if you are afraid to have conversations, if you find that you sort of lose everything that you learned when you're in a conversation, you probably should consider at least taking a few classes, 10 classes, to get used to it, right? Because that's communication. If you can't do that, you're not really communicating, right? So consider it. So that's the question to ask yourself. Are you making progress or are you not? If you are, if you're making a lot of progress, you're improving very quickly, okay, maybe you don't need to get a private teacher. If you're stuck, a private teacher may be able to help you get better. Now, where should you go if you want to get a private teacher? Well, if you know someone, that's great, right? Ask your fellow learners, other people who are working on their English, hey, do you guys know any teachers? Because personal recommendations are probably the most powerful. They've kind of tried it out for you. This teacher's really good. That teacher's excellent. They can definitely point out things you need to work on. Awesome teacher. If you have that kind of personal recommendation, that's probably best. If not, there are quite a few services out there. Now, I'm just going to mention these, but I'm not putting a strong endorsement behind any of them. I'm not an expert on any of these, but these are some options that you may have. italki is pretty popular. You can find a teacher there. You can do, I think, a demo class or a trial class. You can see their videos. You can see how many classes they've taught, their ratings, and so on. I've also heard that Verbling is okay, right? Verbling is a good way to find teachers. There's one that's a little bit older called Preply. In my opinion, the name is a little silly. Preply allows you to find teachers one-to-one. You can, as I understand it, bid on classes. They have a sort of interesting model. And then there's Cambly, and I would just say for Cambly, it's going to be more small talk. So it's not as often lessons. You can do it anytime you want, but it's often more like, hey, how have you been these days? What's going on with you? And so you might do a couple of those and then realize, oh, actually every class is kind of the same thing. We're not really going anywhere. So it might be useful to take a couple from there, but well, you can try it for yourself. Those are some options that you might consider if you're looking for classes for a one-to-one English teacher. I'm not saying you have to do this for 10 years. I'm not saying you have to take 1,000 classes, right? But consider those questions, and then if your answer to those questions is, oh, yeah, I guess maybe I do need a teacher, try 10 lessons at first. If you really are making progress with those 10 lessons, then keep going, right? If you feel like you're getting to a point where, okay, now I know what my issues are, now I'm able to improve on my own, stop. It's okay, right? But it can be a very important part of your spoken English journey. It can be a very important part of actually improving. Now, I said I was going to give you one thing to consider to decide whether or not a teacher is good. Before you sign up with a teacher, always make sure you do a sort of trial class with them first. Never choose a teacher without trying a class. You should be able to try a class for free or very, very cheaply. You should. The reason for that is not every student matches every teacher. And also, as I mentioned, there are a lot of bad teachers out there, a lot of good teachers out there. The only way to know is to try. But what are the characteristics of a good teacher? Well, I would say a good indication of the characteristics of a good teacher would be, and this is not the only thing, but one of the things to look for is, can this teacher give me specific feedback within the class itself? That means in the moment, they're able to identify things that I didn't know I needed to work on, point those out to me, and tell me how I can work on those things. Very specific. Now, why specific? Why not say something like, well, you need to improve your grammar. If a teacher ever tells you in general, you need to improve your grammar, or you need to work on your tenses, or you need to get better at your maybe usage of vocabulary, or they say, oh, good job, but keep working, or something. It's so bad. It's bad. It's dumb. It's bad. Don't sign up with that teacher. If a teacher can tell you specifically, you said this, and you should say this, and they're able to tell you, right? They're able to let you know what you did, what you said, and tell you how to say it better. Then that means they're very aware, they have experience, they know what they're talking about, they're paying close attention, right? Anytime you get those sort of very general feedback points, work on your grammar, then don't take more classes with that teacher. Not good. Right? Unless you just like talking with them, okay, but it might be a waste of money. So always make sure you get specific feedback, and that would be a good way to decide whether or not they are good at teaching English and they have experience. So hopefully this is useful. If you have any other questions about this, let me know. Don't forget also to hit the thumbs up or like button. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my full courses, discounted now, in the links in the description.